For those of you joining us today, The Complete Advisor, I'm very happy that you are here for a very special conversation. We're going to talk to Charles Sawyer, and we're going to talk today. Our theme is consistency. And, I was thinking about this, Charles, before you came in, and having been in sales myself, one of the things that I think has always been like a hallmark is the peaks and valleys. And I think anybody that's out there that started in the business knows exactly what I'm talking about. In fact, Frank Sinatra, I know that you like some great music, but in the song That's Life, he has that line, riding high in April, shot down in May. And I know in my own career there's been moments like that. But when I look at your production and what you've done year over year, because we have you and Creative, we have a very long relationship. The one thing that, if I were to pick one word for you, is consistency. It's just year over year over year. You are 100% consistent, and that's what I wanted to talk about. But before we dive into that topic, let's talk a little bit about you. So I'm looking on your website, and 30 years plus in the business.
35.
35.
January 4th this year was 35 years in the industry and 21 in my own practice.
Wow. Well, let's talk about your start then. Did you right out of college are you a college graduate guy or?
Actually, I went to school for nursing.
Really?
Yeah. And sold rainbow vacuum cleaners door to door for 4 years to put myself through school.
Golly.
And was making back in 1984 probably $55,000, $60,000 a year selling rainbow vacuum cleaners. I was the only guy in a class of 60 females at the Charles Sawyer School of Nursing in Syracuse. And we had a meeting with the administrator who said I was going to be working from midnight to 8. Mm-hmm. And if I stay there for 4 years, they'll pay back my tuition. It was kind of a break off of Syracuse University. I actually raised my hand, asked him, and the pay was around $18,000-$19,000 a year. And I raised my hand and asked him to go back to the pay part. And of course, he was annoyed that I was asking that question. It's a true story. He told me the pay. I was making a lot more selling rainbow vacuum cleaners. I actually set my books down, got up, and quit.
No. So what led you? That is a fantastic story. I had no idea, and I've known you for a while here. So what led you into nursing? What was the attraction?
I'm growing up in upstate New York, I was kind of take a career path of either farming, hospital, and I'm much more of I like to take care of people. I think I would have been a very good nurse, although the nurse hatchet didn't like me very much because I couldn't make a bed. But in nursing school, what was interesting is I did a lot of volunteer work. Mm-hmm. So I would go to the hospital quite often and visit a lot with the cancer patients. I got in trouble one time because I did take this patient who had probably days left to live, and all he wanted to do is see a sunrise. And I lifted him out of bed, put him in a chair to see the sunrise, which I got in big trouble for doing that because I wasn't supposed to move him out of bed. And my thought was, you got 3 or 4 days to live. Yeah. So I think part of that was my compassion for helping people, which kind of probably helped me a lot in this business. So I left school and actually...
I would have loved to have seen that.
Yeah.
I'm setting the books down and I'm out of here.
That's right. And so I've had my own business actually since I was like 13. It's a very long story. When kids are 13, 14 years old, they cut grass. I used to hitchhike 30 to 40 miles just to get jobs, and I had a couple of my friends who were actually employees. So I was making $3 an hour, paying them $1.50. And back when I was 15, 16 years old, I actually worked 3 jobs. Had my own business, worked at a short order cook at the truck stop, and worked part-time at the Dairy Queen making ice cream. Golly. So by the time I was 16, I had about $17,000 saved. My father was a steam fitter, and my mom stayed at home. And so basically I ran the household. So after leaving nursing school, I actually became a part owner of a tidy car location in Middletown, New York, and actually ran and became the largest tidy car location in the country, which is now Z-Bart. So after about a year, I became part owner of the Z-Bart tidy car. We were number 1 in sales. Mm-hmm. And one of the gentlemen I did the car for, his Corvette, and personally took care of it, was first name was Rolf. He was the general manager, general agent for Prudential out of Stamford, Connecticut. And I was living in Middletown. So he's the one that actually said, you need to get out of this business and come in the insurance business, and actually got my life and health in Stamford, Connecticut, where my daughter was actually born. And I had no Project 100 because I didn't know anybody in Connecticut. And back in those days, the first thing you do is start with a Project 100, see all your friends, relatives, and so on and so forth. I had no Project 100.
So Project 100, you're writing down like the 100 people you know, and then that's who you're working
My Project 100 was empty. Okay, I drove 2.5 hours to go to work, and then luckily I had a very good sales manager, Sal Batanza, who was 32 years in the business, and he looked at me and said, son, I'm tired of training losers, okay? So if you're going to be a loser, tell me now so I can retire. If you're going to be a winner, you have to listen to everything I tell you to do and don't question it. And back then we had a desk, we had 10 desks, 10 agents, 2 phones, and a payphone.
Oh, my Lord.
So, and if I didn't have 16 appointments per week, and he's the one that took me out, he'd take me out to diners and stuff and tell me how to talk, how to treat people and meet people. If I didn't have 16 appointments per week, we had a funnel thing, I had to go to his house on Sunday evenings, make phone calls. So we had an orphan thing. What happened one day, this is a quick story, you probably haven't heard this, but how it just kind of got me started in the business. So one of the, back then, was you had the ladies, they used to call them ladies up front, clerical, right? People come in and pay their premiums, and we used to have a debit book. This is when the debit just stopped, okay? So I did 2 unique things that actually got me where I am today. So one of the clerical comes out to a gentleman who says, your client passed away, and you'd like to handle the death claim. He said, no, send it in the mail. So again, this was my second week in the business. I went up to her, and we became very good friends, and I said, would you mind if I drove out to the family and handled the death claim in person? She said, I would love that. So many people here mail out the death claims, and I think it's ridiculous. Went out, this lady, I just kind of remember, it was like in their 30s, lost her husband in a car accident, 2 children, started crying. She became a client, and I went back to the office and said, anybody that doesn't want to handle death claims, I will handle every death claim that's there, okay? That was the first thing I did. The second thing I did, there was 2 MDRT agents. So I'm in my 20s. So I decided, my wife and I decided that instead of going to the bars and restaurants, we would save our money and kind of become part of their inner circle and get to know them. So they would go out to nice restaurants on the weekends. I invited myself to those nice restaurants because I said I'm not going to learn from hanging out with some people in their 20s going to a bar drinking all day. I'm going to go to the nice Italian restaurants. The second thing I did, I went to a gentleman who was one of the top of the table, and I said to him, he was part of our group, I said, look, I'll make a deal with you. Became friends. I'll come over to your house every Wednesday. He had a big Cadillac. Back then, you go visit people in their homes. I will drive you as your chauffeur to your appointments. I want to listen and absorb. I'll buy you lunch, and I'll complete all your applications for you every Wednesday. Okay? That was kind of the start of where I became. And then what happened was, make a real long story short, I became a sales manager. Okay? Realized I couldn't live in Stamford, Connecticut. It was too expensive. Moved back to Syracuse and founded a ward district. They didn't have a book of business, so I created my own. Became the second leading agent in the office in the first year. And I wanted to go back into management. And again, I had a real good general manager. He said, I don't have a staff for you. I said, I don't need staff. I said, I want 4 people, okay? These 4 people are not doing well. I think they can do well. I'll create my own staff. We won a President's Citation in the next 2 years. I became Sales Manager of the Year the 3rd year of the Prudential. And at that point, they evaluated me to become assistant to the VP, and then they moved me to Buffalo. And I ran 3 agencies in Buffalo that were the last 3. They were the last 3 districts in the 93 offices of Prudential, and within 4 or 5 years, we got them all in the top 10.
Golly, maybe I should have titled this, instead of consistency, I should have titled this Charles Sawyer Force of Nature.
Well, so the reason I tell this story is when I started my own practice 21 years ago, it wasn't always consistent every single year. Okay. So the reason I tell that story is because it got me where I was. When I left corporate America 21 years ago, I had to start fresh again. I had no clients, I had no leads, and I went back to the old-fashioned mortgage leads, We started the VA outreach program, and that's where we got into the referrals. So just to kind of some of the reps who go through the ups and downs, one of the things I did over the last 21 years was every year I'm a goals-oriented person, okay? January 1st to December 31st, right? And then start the new year, new goals, new objectives. I kind of got away from that a little bit, even though I'm very, very competitive at this point still. I just kind of looked at it as one year is going to run into the other, okay, and try to keep the train rolling. I find that it's very disruptive for reps and agents to say that it's December 31st, now you have to do this all over again. And it becomes
That's a good point.
It can become you can have a lot of anxiety saying, oh, I hit my $10 million. Crap, I got to do it again.
Yeah.
Okay. Keep the train going. And it's not that you don't want to hit your objective for the year. It's very important. But don't put as much emphasis on making sure that, okay, now it's January 1st. It'll cause you a lot of anxiety and agita because now you're saying, I got to do it again. Trying to keep it consistent. Now, what we do and how we became referral-based only is I made a decision. I didn't want to knock on doors. I didn't want to do seminars. Not that there's anything wrong with them. I didn't want to do radio. I didn't want to do TV again. There's not that I couldn't do it. But I decided that if I had enough referrals that came into the office and I demand referrals and expect referrals, that I wouldn't have to go out and do that. Okay? And everybody that walks in our office, in fact, last year was the first person that walked in. She was a pharmacist that came from the internet. And that's in the last probably 17, 18 years. Okay? Everybody that comes in our office, it's a warm introduction. And by the way, you talked a few minutes ago, you asked me a little bit about slumps. It doesn't mean that Charles Sawyer doesn't go through slumps. Charles Sawyer does go through slumps. I haven't been through a slump in a few years, but I will tell you that here's my way to get out of a slump. Okay? It's very simple, and it's what I learned 35 years ago when I started with Prudential. See the people, see the people, see the people, see the people, see the people. We do reviews. We have an A list, a B list, and a C list, okay? So right now, I gave Jeanette the A, B, and C list and told her to fill our schedule with reviews, okay? Those reviews are going to lead to referrals as long as you expect and demand referrals automatically. So last year we had 44 new households that came in from referrals. And, well, let's call it one was not referral, okay, with about $34 million of new assets. So that's what we average per year is between 35 and 45 new households per year, between 30 and $40 million of new assets. That's 100% referrals.
Golly.
So, but when this slump does happen, it will happen and probably will happen to me again. I will go back to what I do. And, give you an example. When I had my worst slump was probably 4 or 5 years ago. And I decided, and I think I actually had a meeting at Creative because I'm like, do I start seminars? Do I start radio? Do I start this? They start that. And I don't remember who I spoke to, but their recommendation was no. They said, you're very good at what you do. Go back to what you know best. Continue to do it. Improve upon it. Okay, with the help, and again, Creative's been wonderful. They helped me create the referral packets. They're actually helping me create a new one, and seeing the people, and that's what gets to the referrals. Referrals are something that once you start, I get asked all the time, how do you start getting referrals, and how come I can't get referrals? I don't have a good answer for that because I've been doing it for so long.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that expecting referrals, the packets that we use, I've been talking about this for 20 years. For me, it works. This year, our goal was $50 million of new assets for the staff. We actually ended the year at $75,800,000 of new money coming in. So we surpassed the goal by quite a bit. But again, this year, we set another goal, but it's how many new households are we going to bring in?
Do you think let's keep diving into referrals there, and then we got to go back to some of your story. Especially, I do want to talk a little more about what you went through a couple years ago then with the slump. But when it comes to referrals, do you think? I know that you get asked about referrals all the time because I've been at conferences with you. And is it something that when people ask you, is it hard to understand where they're coming from because you've done it so consistently and you've got it down so well? Or it's kind of a block and tackle and they're just looking for some kind of magic pill?
Well, it's probably because I've been doing it so long. I got to go back, and it's interesting because we had. Sometimes people think that it's automatic. Some newer people come in the office, staff, and they'll think, "Well, we've been doing this forever." And Jeanette, who's Jane's sister, came in one day with my appointment books, and this goes back to 2008, 2000. She started with me with 2006. Okay, I didn't realize she kept all my appointment books.
Oh, that's interesting.
So some of the staff were talking about Charles's goals are too ambitious and so on and so forth. And she came into the staff with about 5 appointment books, okay? And she said, stop, I want to show you something, okay? And she started showing the staff the appointment books of not only how many appointments we had per week, but it's interesting. We had dinners Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night. It showed where Jane and I would come in we did appointments on Saturday morning from 9 to 5 and had a client dinner at 6 o'clock on Saturday night. We were averaging between 3 and 5 dinners, sometimes 6 per week. What are these dinners? These dinners are not client presentations. These are client, get to know clients, okay, and building. I'll just tell you a couple of things that brought the referrals in, okay, that people don't do. So we would make an appointment at 4 o'clock, do a review, and then go to dinner. We never talked about business at dinner. We talked about their children, everybody knows that, right? You know how to build that. And that's how we got the referrals, by building their personal relationships. Jane came up with the stool idea, and we talked about this at the meeting. We've got a ton of referrals about the stools, where when somebody has a new grandchild, we've been sending out these stools that has the children's name in it, and it's a puzzle. Been doing it for 15 years. Okay, those things get referrals.
Wait, what is that? Tell me again.
So it was her idea many years ago. What happens is when they have a grandchild or they have a child, we order a stool, costs about $60. It's a puzzle with the child's name in it. It's a stool, and it's a block with their names. And as they get older, they start using that to brush their teeth. We get pictures.
Awesome.
We get pictures from the grandparents, from the parents who now become our clients. Thank you for the stool. Our kids are using it. We actually had one client. It's funny. It wasn't done on purpose. This is just so one of our best clients came in and said, "I had a new grandchild and a new stool." And they said, "You're gonna guess what the first name of?" I don't think they did it for me. Okay, first name of the client or the grandchild was Sawyer.
Oh, nice.
Okay. They came in a year later and said we had our second grandchild, same son. Guess what his name is? Charles.
Oh my goodness.
So anyways, it wasn't done on that purpose, but the point being is now there are clients. We're doing multi-generational planning, right? So we're now getting the next generation coming in. So that's happening through that. And then we have the packets, the little referral packets that we hand out, and actually Creative's working on a new one as we speak.
Yep, updating them. Yep.
Okay, updating those referral packets. But anything that you can do, and again, we spoke about this many times, to just build personal relationships, expect referrals. When a client first comes in, because they're referred by somebody else, my opening presentation or opening discussion is I say I get paid 3 ways, okay? I get paid as fee-based planner. If we use a commissional product such as life insurance and annuity, the insurance company may pay me directly, depending on the investment. And the third and most important reason of how I get paid is referrals. If I do a good job for you, if you decide to join our family, and we do the planning for you, and we don't know if it's a good fit yet, we do expect you, if you're happy, to refer us to other friends and colleagues. That's the first 15 minutes of conversation when they first walk in.
Putting the expectation out there.
Absolutely.
So building the relationships, that is one thing that I feel like that folks do miss, even though they're in this business of relationships. I do want to take a step back because I think there's someone we do need to acknowledge. We haven't mentioned the fact that your partner in the business.
Yeah, my wife.
Is your wife, Jane.
Yeah.
Have you always worked together?
Yeah, so when we first met, I said, so Jane was working at a doctor's office. She was the assistant office manager, doing a great job, working really, really hard, 50, 60 hours a week. And I said, so we're sitting on a beach in New Jersey, okay? And she's raising her children basically by herself and working really hard. And I said, first started dating, I said, you got to quit your job. She said, what? Well, you can't work where you're working. So he says, what's wrong with you? I said, well, first of all, I work real hard, and if I go on trips, okay, if we're going to stay a week, I may want to stay 8 days or 9 days. I don't call in, okay. And number two, if you're going to work with me and we're going to be together, you're going to work with me in my office, not somebody else's office where you're making them money. You're going to help us make money.
That makes sense.
So yeah, we've been working together this is our 15th year wedding anniversary, so we've been working together 16 years.
Golly. Well, that's really cool. Congratulations. And she's wonderful.
Yeah,
she's here today. If we could have coaxed her on, it would have been great. But we're just happy to have you both here. So going back to referrals and building relationships, if I'm not mistaken, you do a big event every year?
We do an event, of course, with COVID. This will be the first year we're going to do it in October. We do a crab feast. It's a family crab feast. We used to do it in our home. Our home got too big. It was around 450 people.
Wow.
We invite their spouses, of course, their children. It's an afternoon event. We have a band. So the last one we had was, I guess, 3 years ago.
19? Would that be
19,
right?
yeah. And we had 560 people at the event.
Golly.
So our goal is to make sure we see everybody at least once during that event. We're going to do it again this year. Last year we kind of had a mixed bag. People didn't want to do it. So we are going to do it again this year. We also, the other thing we do is we do the Smith Island cakes.
What item is? I don't know.
That's a Maryland cake. We sent out 485 cakes this year.
Wow.
For the holidays. I think we're their biggest client. And the reason we send a cake, so this is an interesting thing. So family get-togethers, through the holidays, whether right between Thanksgiving and Christmas or Hanukkah and New Year's, right? Mm-hmm. The Smith Island cake is kind of a famous thing in Maryland, all right? And it's a big dessert, okay? So my whole thought was send this cake out. It costs about $86, and it's a conversation piece, okay? So it's worked out very well. We send them out between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then we get a lot of calls and we get people every year come in and say, how do I get a Smith Island cake? Well, you invest your $2 million, you get a Smith Island cake.
Is there a Smith Island cake tier at the office?
No, we don't have that. Everybody gets it. So one thing that's very interesting, that's a great comment you just made. So coming from my background, very blue-collar, upstate New York background, I've been very careful, and this is something that may be good or bad, but, I started out with people who had $100,000, and now we have our average client comes in with $1.5 million to $2.5 million. But I don't want to forget the people who have $200,000-$300,000. I can't service them, so I hired other advisors that can do that. I want to make sure that my promise that I made to them 10, 12 years ago was kept. So we have another advisor that sees and meets with all those clients, but they get invited to all the events. They all get the cake. We don't separate it and say, okay, you're an A client, you're going to get a cake. You're a C client, you don't get a cake. Now, we'll tell you, one of the things I learned a long time ago is some of the C clients become A clients. But some of the C clients are always going to be C clients. It means they're very good people. That $200,000 is very important to them, right? So we got to service them, take care of them, but I may not ask them for referrals. So it doesn't mean we ask everybody for referrals. So one of the ways I raise my average client is I stopped asking for referrals from people that don't have money.
That's a great thought. I mean, that's brilliant.
So doesn't mean we don't service them. Doesn't mean they don't send people in, and we take care of them. They're good people. They need to be serviced. They deserve it. But it doesn't mean I'm going to ask them for referrals, right? Because I want to, excuse me, I don't want to have more $50,000 people in our firm.
Sure.
But I'm not going to cut them off and say, we're not going to take care of you.
That's simple and yet brilliant because, when it comes to referrals, always, the mantra is always ask for referrals. And really what you should be doing is what you're doing, which is looking for that ideal client and wanting to replicate that ideal client. But I love the commitment back to the people who, you started with. And that does fly a little bit in the face of, every business coach runs through the, segment your clients A, B, C, and D and differentiate on what they get, what events and things like that. But that's probably why you're as successful as you are.
One of the things that happened this past year with the economy, which is very interesting. I think we got more larger clients this past year is because the economy being as bad as it was. We use a lot of alternatives and institutional investments in our Schwab account. We use a lot of structured notes. So we don't just use retail investments. So our clients that we're meeting with have come through very well through this recessionary period. So they might be down 2 or 3%. Some clients are up 4 or 5%. Some clients are flat.
Yeah.
Because we use a lot of institutional funds, okay, and we use a lot of structured notes. So our clients did very well. So I tell the clients, I said, look, at 90% of your friends and colleagues are dealing with retail investments. And people talk about to their friends about the stock market 2 different times, when it's way up and when it's way down. So you've come in here, you had $2 million in February of last year, you have $1,950,000 now, or $1,000,009, whatever it is, and you feel really good. I said, your friends aren't feeling really good at the present time. So that's why you need to talk to them. That's when I hand them the packets.
Yeah.
And if they say, well, you give me, give me 2 more, give me 3 more. I was just thinking about this person. Or you already gave me three months ago. I said, well, you still have the 3, then you're not doing your job. I need to give you 3 more. I don't push it on them. I'm not hard, but I'd make it kind of funny and so on and so forth. But I think the consistency is at 35 to 45 new households. I don't want 100. I don't really want 50, but 35 to 45 per year, which is every year. It's just consistent every single year, 35 to 45.
What does it look like on the other side then so let's say that I got a packet, my wife and I, and Paul and I come into, we're referred in. What does that look like on that side? I'm coming in brand new, but I've been referred by my friends, the Smiths. Is that a different? I guess that would actually be just your normal introductory conversation.
My introductory conversation is 100% the same every time. So when they come in, it's like anybody else. At least I don't jump into business right away. I'm a talker, as you can see. I just kind of I don't have a routine. I can move and jiggle around a routine. So I'll talk to them how they know them, get to know, so on and so forth. Then I go through our staff. I go through on the board before we talk about business. I introduce everybody on the staff. Brian, Kevin, Jane, Jeanette, who's her sister, Lisa, who's the sister-in-law, my son, who runs the service department, our affiliation with the attorneys and the CPAs. So I go through the firm first. I also direct them to some of our videos that we do and resources. That's a good idea for them to go back and look at that. And then the video I did, probably going on 10 years ago, that I still use. That's my philosophy on client service and our business, which I encourage them to go watch after they leave. We do the intake, just like probably most people do. We do an intake. I will send them an email telling them we'll open a portal for them to send all their statements. I will send out an email that was very nice to meet them. We look forward to their next meeting, but I make sure I send an email to each person, each client after they leave. And it's almost immediate. I mean, I try to do it within hours, a personal email. And then they come back, go through the recommendations. We still use financial profiles, which I've been using for 30 years. The recommendation is probably the same as everybody else does, and then we book a third appointment. Sometimes it'll close on a second appointment, but very often a third appointment, and then a third appointment in the close, they get a welcome packet from Jeanette. And again, we start asking for referrals once they join the team.
I love it. Consistency, just over and over again. You've got that process down, and you can hear it the way you say it, and it just must run like a Swiss watch at the practice.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that doing their reviews, I think most people do reviews. The A clients, we do quarterly reviews, whether it's in person or Zoom. We do a lot of management of 401ks, so those are necessary. We have to do quarterly reviews. But the A clients, we do quarterly reviews. We try to book their appointment at the time they leave. And a review can just be a review. It doesn't mean that we're going to get business every time. Of course, it's not going to happen.
Right.
But again, the emphasis is if I see that person and see him and see him and see him, I'm not trying to bring in 100 new people and then knowing I'm going to lose 30, 40 out the back door, and I'm trying to bring in 100 new in the front door. That's not something I want to do. I mean, I work 4 days a week at this point. The goal is to have a good team, good support staff. And the other thing I would say is this. You have to have not just a good support staff. You got to spend some money. The hardest part for me was, one of the hardest parts was, how do I spend the money, right? I didn't have all that money in nowhere. I wasn't making $5 million, $6 million a year 10, 15 years ago, right? But I realized that, yes, I wanted to make a lot of money, and you can make a lot of money in this business and have one person, right?
Right.
And still make $600,000-700,000 a year, which is it's a lot of money, okay? But you're not going to get to $6 million a year in revenue or $5 million a year with one assistant. It's not going to happen. In most cases, I've seen it happen once. It's not going to happen. I have, including Jane, 11, right? 10, 11, I think 11 staff. The service is the first and most important part. Making sure when somebody calls, that service gets done. I do every reallocation form myself.
Wow.
On every single annuity. So I have one person that every Wednesday gives me a packet of papers. I go through every single reallocation on every annuity personally.
Well, you guys, your office, when I said a Swiss watch a second ago, everybody must be really dialed in on what they do.
It's not perfect, but yeah, they're dialed in. And the clients, we have clients that come in, sit down and have coffee with our service staff. But I go through every allocation form myself. I fill out now I'm not saying to do this. This is me. I fill out every suitability form. I fill out every annuity application. That's my Sunday work. Every life insurance application. So I'm still old-fashioned. I need to move a little bit forward with that. But to me, it keeps me involved.
Sure.
Okay. But going back to spending money, what I realized was I cannot have the size clientele have $700 million under management between annuities and AUM, and the number of clients and households that we have, and get referrals if I can't service them. So I had to find a way to say, okay, I got to pay myself first, but I have to find good people and have to pay them. I mean, our payroll last year was, including myself, was over almost $2 million. It was over 1.5 without me, something like that. It's a lot of payroll. It can cause a lot of anxiety. I'm not saying you get there overnight. A lot of people say they have to get there, and they say, well, Charles, you make a lot of money. You have a lot of revenue coming in, so it's not me. You're different. I was where you were 10, 15 years ago, trust me. And there was times it was a struggle, and Jane will tell you that we had payroll, and it was tight because we had more payroll coming in than business. So one of the downsides of our business is lagging, right? So we write a piece of business. It doesn't mean we get paid right away, but we have to pay everybody else. So again, having good people, but be willing to, if you really want to go from 7 million or 8 million, if you really want to do it, and that doesn't mean everybody wants to do it. I mean, $8, $9, $10 million of production is very good.
Sure.
I mean, you're going to make a lot of money. If you want to get to 20 million or 25 or 30 million or whatever it is that you want to get to, it can't happen. It won't happen. It's impossible to happen unless you have staff and you spend money doing it. You just got to get over that hurdle.
So where do you look when you're looking to build that staff out? And gosh, I have just like a million questions for you. But where do you look when you're spending? Where do you start with? Your office manager? Do you start with, who would you say is key staff to ramp up like that?
My key staff, good question. So we've been very fortunate to have real low turnover. Most people have left because of having family, helping family, very low turnover, but people do leave, okay? So we did have one of my right-hand people left a few years ago. Jane started interviewing, and she found Leah, who's our now paraplanner, who I said, I think she's too tough for me. And Jane says, no, she's exactly what you need. She was correct. Leah is my right-hand person now. She is, I go to her for everything, okay? And she's been with me, I guess, 7, 8 years now.
What do you mean too tough? Was too detailed or?
Too tough, in other words, I'll give you an example. When she first started, I was getting every email in the office, okay? She stopped all that. So she took control. So when I say tough, she did what she was supposed to do. And Jane says, she's exactly what you need because you're micromanaging the office, and she'll take control of that. You need to be focused on what you need to focus on, and that's business. And she stopped all the emails.
Was it hard to let go?
At first,
Yeah.
but now I feel I'm here. I feel very comfortable. My office is running great without me. So getting good people, and what we do is when we lose somebody or need to add, we actually try to do it internally, which means you know somebody who is looking for a good opportunity from another firm. Instead of trying to go out, it's hard to find people. You can't put ads in the paper and so on and so forth. But even clients, okay, we just hired Patrick, who Series 7 license, that came from a client. So actually getting a referral from a client, not necessarily one of their children,
Sure.
but maybe a nephew or something like that. I don't like to hire children of my clients, but all the time. But doing it internal.
That makes sense because if I know that if I'm asked about somebody and I give a referral, because I'm very protective of my reputation, I'm not going to refer somebody unless I think that they're 100% solid because it's a reflection back on me. But I could see where with the child of a client that could become awkward.
Just be careful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So how do you maintain? Let's take a step back to that word consistency, and I have to ask you one question. So you did say you're working about 4 days a week, but then you said you're doing your looking suitability on Sundays. So are you really working 4 days a week, or are you sneaking some extra?
I
work in?
don't count Sundays and filling out applications working. I kind of like that. Again, going back to the kind of old-fashioned way of thinking, that it's a pleasure sitting there on a couple hours on Sunday filling out applications and watching a football game. And if I don't have applications, then again, I'm like, how come I don't have applications? So it's just kind of an old-fashioned thing, the way I think.
It's a drive. You know, the other thing that you said that I've been thinking about this a lot because I get to talk to a lot of advisors, and I think that there's magic in the fact. I think one thing in our industry that is really cool is that you're impacting clients' lives, and you're building. You built this practice. You built this. It's kind of its own ecosystem, and on one hand, you're bringing in everything for the most part. You're the draw. You are the rainmaker for kind of a word we always use. But at the same time, with the rewards, there's that responsibility that you mentioned and you mentioned it twice. The fact that you've got a staff that you're paying for, and that in our industry, you write the application, comp sometimes can trail like that. But not only do you have the rewards that come with writing that much business and building as awesome of a practice as you have, but then you've got that responsibility that weighs across your shoulders of you've got a staff, and my gosh, you're putting employees' kids through schools, and little Jimmy's braces came because you are providing the health care that they're getting to use, which is does that ever? I don't even want to put that thought in your head, but that's got to bounce around the brain every now and then, doesn't it?
So yeah, yes, and that's a good point because it is a huge responsibility. It used to bother me and concern me much more than it does today because of the consistency. But there was times that I would okay, business is slowing down. We didn't produce what we're supposed to produce, and I do have a responsibility to making sure that they're taken care of. Sure. So on and so forth. It does weigh on your mind, but I think it's a good thing because it can be very motivational to make sure you're out there working.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I think my personality is I'm always working. Even if I'm off on a Friday, I'm off, but I'm always got my finger on the business. Yeah. I think business owners never really 100% off. Most of the time, if they own a business, it's always in the back of their mind, even though they have a great staff. But I will tell you this. I'll be 60 years old, and I worked, as many people do, 60-plus hours a week. And as we become more mature, or another way of saying older, you have to sharpen the knife. So a story I learned many years ago, again, from my first sales manager. Because even back then I was a workaholic. Work. And he'd say, Charles. And back then I was called Chuck. Okay? But he'd say, look, if you and I are both chopping down a tree, okay, and we both have an axe, and I'm chopping down a tree. And it never made sense to me until a few years ago. You're whacking at the tree, and you're whacking. I'm taking really good hits at the tree, slicing, and I'm stopping, and I'm sharpening the axe, okay? I'm going to chop that tree down much sooner than you are, and you're going to tire out much quicker than I am. And I thought he was always full of crap. So for many years, and that didn't make a lot of sense to me, okay? But it does make sense to me now, because as you get older, and it doesn't mean just when you get older, you do have to have balance in your life. It took me a long time to figure that out. Jane probably helped me with that and realizing that with our 7 grandchildren and 6 children.
Congratulations.
But it took me a long time. That was one of the biggest issues, and still is today in some cases, is having outside interest, okay, other than just work, balance, which has always been a really difficult thing for me. I've had professional coach for my whole career who've helped me with that, but having that balance. But as you get older, if you want to stay in the business, you can't work 6 days a week. Now, on the reverse of that, if you want to do $20 million of production, you can't work 2.
Exactly.
So there's got to be a balance, right? I mean, and I'm learning that as I get older is, bringing in better quality referrals, having a good staff, having good people there, and working 4 days a week, sometimes on a weekend, having other experiences, enjoying life a little bit more, allows you to stay in the business a longer time.
I've been thinking about this since you said it. And, so many, in just about any place that I've ever been, we always look at goals 1 year at a time, and we put that 12-month. And like you said, it's okay, so we hit our goal. This was our big goal. Boom, we hit that number. Now you're starting over at 0 and you're going. And I like what you said. So when you approach things, do you look at goals like a kind of a rolling 12, or because you're talking about keeping that train moving?
Yeah, it's a good question, and because in my mind, I still have to, for my staff, have a 12-month goal because they work off a 12-month goal. What I'm trying to train them is and teach them is, and what I do, and a good example, we just set our goal for next year. And part of the trouble is we count the AUM towards the goal. So whatever we convert the assets under management of the money that comes in is what would be equal to an annuity, right? So if the average annuity is 6.5%, if we're bringing in $250,000 of revenue, it gets converted, and the staff gets bonuses and so on based on that, okay? So I'm sitting down trying to think about my goal and what the goal is going to be for next year. We started in 2022 at $50 million was the goal. We hit $50 million by July. So we raised it to $75 million. And then we said, if you do $75 million, we're going to give a bigger bonus because they get quarterly bonuses, and we double them sometimes. Anyways, so I started looking at the goal, and I said to Jane, the problem is, we always do carryover because we did $76 million this year, is right now, in the first 4 days of January, we submitted $1.9 million of annuities in 4 days. And so I have $2 million of annuities already submitted in the first 4 days. Now, if I have the goal too large, it's going to depress them, and it's not motivating them. If it's too low, because I have $3.4 million of AUM counted for January, $2 million of annuities, and I have 6 sitting in my bag, 6 applications sitting in my bag, and we haven't gotten for the first week.
Yeah.
The reason we have that is because we stayed consistent. In other words, I didn't say, okay, December 15th, December 20th, it's the end of the year, and now we're going to take a break, and we'll come back and start fresh January 1st, okay? We kept the business going, the appointments going. Of course, they didn't have the same number of appointments, but my mindset was I didn't stop the train. I just kept it going, still writing business, still doing what we're doing, and have the business flowing into the new year. So it wasn't a stop and a start. And it's more of a mindset of keeping the train running. I always thought if you have a train in motion, it's much easier to keep it in motion than to shut it off. So it doesn't mean, again, every corporate America, and I grew up in corporate America, works off a 12-month goal. Okay? This is how much business we did. This is how much you produced. Congratulations, you did it or you didn't do it. And I come back from a day, okay, that I used to report from Prudential when I was a sales manager on a Tuesday and a Friday, and then we would report to Boston, okay? I remember times when the vice president of the region didn't like my report. He would take the phone, put it in the toilet, flush the toilet, and say, "Sawyer, this is what I think of your report." Okay, so I came through some rough times with reports, right, and goals and objectives, and if you didn't hit them, he wouldn't get away with that today.
Sure.
The point being is, it was hammered into me that those reports and those goals, if you didn't hit them, there was there was consequences. Okay, but in our business, you have to have goals and objectives, and maybe it does run yearly, but it does cause anxiety that you hit your objective. Now I have to do it again.
Yeah.
Instead of saying it is a rolling 12 months, like you said. It's more of a mindset to keep you motivated, so you don't have that anxiety that, oh God, now I got to go out and I got to bring in, another 10, 12, $15 million of business. If you think about this, if you have a payroll, whether it's $500,000, $600,000, and you need $1 million, $1.5 million to run your household, and you're sitting there on a Sunday afternoon and you're thinking, if I need $1 million a year of revenue, okay, and I'm going to work 50 weeks. How much money is that per week? Right?
Yeah.
It's $20,000
I think so, yeah.
for $1 million.
Yep.
So if you need $2 million, that's $40,000. If you need $3 million, it's $60,000 a week. Your commission base or a base and commission and fees. Okay. If you're sitting there and you're the main producer, you're the only person making the money, and you put in your mind that I have to bring in $50,000 between Monday and Friday to run my household and run my office, you will get totally sick.
Yep.
Because there's people that don't make $50,000 in a year.
Yep.
And you're sitting there on a Sunday night rolling in your bed saying, I got to make $50,000 this week. Okay? So trying to keep, and I used to do that. And like, how am I going to do $50,000 a week? I got to make $50,000 a week. I used to tell Jane, I'm going to make $50,000 a week just to make a living.
Yeah.
She said, that's crazy. I mean, I don't make $50,000 a year. You got to make $50,000 a week. So if you really sit down and think about that, it can cause you a lot of anxiety and agita. So my point, what I tried to do to get over that was try to be consistent as much as I can so I can sleep well at night and didn't have those sleepless nights trying to think of the small piece of the big piece of the pie, okay, and that I have to gobble it all up at one time, but become more consistent, and it just happens. It just flows. And once you're consistent, you won't have that agita. It goes away. And it comes with time and just a kind of a mindset way of thinking.
Yeah. Well, that's brilliant. When you were saying that, dividing up the year, dividing up the amount you need, putting it in a weekly number, I was having almost a flashback PTSD to back when I was an advisor, and they would lay it out this way and think about it. And when you said rolling around on a Sunday night thinking about that, I wasn't thinking of a number that big back then, but nail right on the head, right on the head. I tell you what, I think I've run up all the time they were allowing with me with you to get you on the podcast, and this has been awesome. And I hope I can coax you back, because there's a lot of things that we talked about that sparked thoughts and questions that I would love to have further discussions, and I think it'd be very useful for other advisors. So I
appreciate it. I hope everybody has a wonderful and successful year. Make all your dreams and objectives come true. Get lots of referrals. Expect referrals. It'll make your life a lot easier.
I love it. Charles, thank you so much for being on.
Appreciate it.
This podcast is for financial professional use only and not for use with the general public. The information provided is the exclusive property of Creative One and is protected by copyright and other intellectual property laws of the United States. This material has been prepared for informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended to provide, and should not be relied upon for, accounting, legal, tax or investment advice. Creative One is not responsible for the results of programs discussed on this podcast or any liability stemming from the use of it. Although we may promote or recommend the services offered by this company, agents are ultimately responsible for the use of any materials or services and agree to comply with the compliance requirements of their broker-dealer and registered investment advisor, if applicable, and the insurance carriers they represent. Copyright 2022, Creative One Marketing Corporation.